Ukraine has reported continued military offensives by Russia, even after Moscow said it was starting a 3-day unilateral truce in its war with its neighbor. Ukraine said there'd been Russian assaults in parts of the Eastern Front after the ceasefire had been due to start at midnight. The claim has not been confirmed. There have been no reports of Ukrainian strikes on Russia today. Russia says its 3-day ceasefire is timed to coincide with Second World War commemorations. Kyiv rejects the truce and has repeated its call for a longer ceasefire. In his latest nightly address, President Zelensky condemned Russia for failing to respond to his proposal. Meanwhile, events are taking place in Russia and across Europe to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War on the continent. On the 8th of May in 1945, live radio announcements in France and Britain declared the war against Nazi Germany had come to an end.
The world's DID 80 years ago. When IT finally became clear to everyone, evil cannot be appeased. IT must be fought together resolutely with force, with pressure on the battlefield, in the diplomatic arena, in the economic sphere wherever possible, so that never again become a reality. Or else the world will have to carry out the denazification and demilitarization if Russia.
Або світу доведеться проводити денацифікацію.
Well, for more on this, let's speak now to the international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz, who joins me on the line from London. Now, Marek, thank you very much indeed for your patience. I don't know how Catholic you are, but that was a significant moment in history, and we were live there at the Vatican. But let's talk about the ceasefire. I wonder what you're hearing about that amid Ukrainian accusations that Russia has launched guided bombs towards Ukraine after announcing that its own ceasefire had come into force.
Well, I think the problem is that it wasn't agreed by President Zelensky that there was to be a ceasefire. As I understand it, he wants a 30-day ceasefire and was not interested in a 3-day ceasefire. As a result, I don't think there is a ceasefire. It may be that Russia will launch missiles or will launch less of them. It's hard to say. The other problem is that just before, the Ukraine put some drones on Moscow's airports, making it quite clear that if they wanted to, they could disrupt the entire VE Day celebrations in Moscow. And in fact, this has been taken into account because they're very subdued this time, the marches, which used to be full of many troops and military hardware and so on. And therefore, for both reasons, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest that the Russians have decided just to, it's business as usual and carry on bombing Ukraine.
So really, I mean, this ceasefire is all about protecting the Second World War parade, which is tomorrow, Friday. And that's a key political event for Russia, especially given the expected presence of 27 heads of state. I understand the Chinese president is already there.
Yes, exactly. It's a huge PR day for them. It shows Russia as this military superpower, has defeated Nazi Germany. And to be honest, they were certainly easily one of the big three, arguably easily perhaps the biggest in terms of sheer loss of German manpower on the Eastern Front, albeit also because of the climate, harsh climate there. But either way, it's an enormous propaganda moment for them. If it works well, it'll be a propaganda coup. The fact that so many heads of state have come, even though Putin has been declared a war criminal by so many people in the West, even though in the recent, if you notice, agreement between the US and Ukraine, Russia has been called a full-blown aggressor. Nevertheless, 20 heads of state are there, and in particular the Chinese. And the Chinese have said something very interesting, that they must stand together against neo-Nazism. Of course, there are two interpretations. One is, and here comes the more normal one, the Chinese suffered immensely at the hands of Japan, and it may be there for a reference to Japan, although it never called itself Nazi. But I suspect it is actually a coded way of saying that he supports Russia in its war against Ukraine because it's one of the key points of Russia's propaganda onslaught against Ukraine, that Ukraine is run by neo-Nazis and has been, unfortunately, taken the wrong track because of them. And so I suspect that therefore, this point by the Chinese president, his visit in person to this event, is of significance.
Well, absolutely. And of course, they reiterated today the fact that they're building and strengthening their strategic alliance. They cast their bond as a sort of counter to what they call unilateralism and hegemonic bullying behavior from the United States. And as we mentioned, I understand that Mr. Xi will be the guest of honor at tomorrow's military parade on Red Square. But just returning to the issue of that ceasefire, is there also an element of trying to show President Trump that Vladimir Putin isn't the stumbling block to peace that Mr. Trump is beginning to think he is?
Well, quite possibly. To be honest, I think that Russia has taken far more of an independent line than has been suggested in the media. As indeed I've stated, it really doesn't matter to them whether President Trump is A, entirely on their side, or B, is at least only a lukewarm ally of Ukraine. Either way, they're getting on with, as they see it, their expansion program. And so therefore, I took the ceasefire as being only to do with the VE Day celebrations. And on the other hand, the fact that it was mooted, yes, there may be something in it for Trump, but a 3-day ceasefire, I don't think is all that much of a signal. Far more important, if you want to look for signals, is that apparently Putin has indicated he's prepared to meet Trump. The problem is now that Trump is less than enthusiastic to meet Putin. I think Trump has the impression that Putin has been, so to speak, playing him, as he said so famously just a short time ago. And therefore, as a result, relations have cooled. But how far, by how much, is hard to say. So I would go on the ceasefire. But your point about China and Russia is very important, because this is actually not just today. It's been a point by Chinese and Russia for many years now. They want a multipolar world, not one dominated by this hyperpowers, the French call it, of the USA. And there are certainly things that they could get together on, one of which is a reserve currency apart from the dollar, which has been mooted many times. There are indeed a superb fit between Chinese technology and Russia's resources, between the fact that both of these are big enough to withstand USA, and therefore, as a result, that, I think, are the key issues.
Okay, Dr. Marek, thank you very much indeed, and I'm sorry it took a bit of time to get to you there. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the International Affairs Analyst. He was talking to me on the line from London.